So something fun happened tonight. I presented my last presentation for my college career.
Oh, what? That's
Yay!
exciting.
That's awesome.
Thank you. I took a shot of tequila. Now I'm drinking mimosas, so that's where I'm at right now.
At the home stretch now. That's very cool.
Gotta survive the next 3 weeks and everything will be okay.
I'll drink to that too. You know your life is just a dream, don't you?
Welcome to Who Fucking Knows, a podcast where three friends, a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead, discuss conspiracy theories, murder mysteries, and unknown phenomena that make you wonder who fucking knows what happened. My name is Angela.
I'm Taylor.
I'm Lexi.
Was there a delay? That was like a long
Yeah,
gap. That's
like,
just
I'm
me.
late. It's just-
I was waiting for one of you to say something.
we both introduce ourselves.
We're a little rusty. It's been a while.
We're a very dysfunctional group of individuals. It's fine. And it has been a little while.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, something very quick, something very funny. My brother, since he listens to every single episode, he says that whenever he's watching TV and like a hostess of something is like, welcome, he just hears welcome to Who Fucking Knows. He's like, you guys got your intro stuck in my head.
Awesome. Oh.
Is it the same brother who got us the shots, the alien shots?
Yeah, we gotta drink those
Yeah.
on like our next mini
Oh
or
my
something.
god.
Yeah, I'm not doing that today.
Yeah, and I was like,
Sorry.
I have work tomorrow.
For those of you who don't follow our Instagram, which you should, it's WFKEN knows. We posted some photos of our shenanigans in Santa Barbara. It's been a couple weekends now, but we had a little girls trip, and he got us little shot glasses shots that were shaped like alien heads.
I actually have one right here.
There we
Boom.
go. See, look at that.
There
That's
it
fucking
is.
So
awesome.
cute.
We got drunk. We made new friends, and we stole some glasses. We borrowed some glasses
Forever. All right. Should I go into the current event?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true. I'm ready for the current event. Yes, Angela.
Okay.
I hope
so,
it's the current
I don't know
event
if you guys,
I'm thinking of.
the monolith. Have you guys been hearing about this stuff?
Tell me
I live under a
everything.
rock.
So, there was a monolith in Utah, and I'll pop up a picture right here. I'm not showing it to you guys, though, but
God,
if you just do a quick Google search. But so there was a monolith that appeared in the middle of nowhere in Utah in like the mountains. And this thing is like this like metal stick rod thing that's like kind of thick, but I think it was like 12 feet tall, something like that. Or no, it's 10 foot tall. And people it appeared out of nowhere. Didn't know where it came from. It was kind of very solidly in the ground. And then as soon as it appeared, it disappeared. And
Wait, what? It disappeared?
yeah, it disappeared. Rumors have it that some people claim to have seen a group of men disassembling it into pieces and taking off with it, but no one really knows. But aside from the Utah monolith, there was also one that popped up in Romania. And so that one, yeah, that was one that popped up in the recent weeks. But today, there was actually another one that popped up in the mountains in California.
Wait, like today as in December
That was
3rd?
just today?
December 3rd. Today, December 3rd.
What the fuck?
One appeared in California. But
What mountains?
so I'm going to read a little something.
Okay.
So
sorry.
the 10-foot tall metal structure were discovered at the top of the mountain on Wednesday morning, with hiker Ray Johnson telling the Atascadero News it has not been there the previous day. So it appeared on Pine Mountain in Atascadero,
Atascadero?
California.
I think that's near San Luis Obispo, not far from Santa Barbara, actually. Mm-hmm. Atascadero, I believe. Yeah.
So
we just missed it.
So, like its predecessors, aka the monolith in Romania and Utah, there are no clues as to how the California monolith got there or what purpose it serves other than to spark rampant speculation. Speculation as in it's fucking aliens. That's what a lot of people are like, it's happening. I told my mom and she was like, man, I wish your dad was here to see the aliens come.
Love it.
Aww.
So, the monolith's construction, the one in California, appears to be similar to its siblings in Utah and Romania, being a smooth three-sided structure with a triangular footprint. It also seems to be made of reflective stainless steel put together with rivets and welding. However, unlike its predecessors, the Californian monolith was not cut into the ground. It could even potentially tip over if somebody pushed it, though we stress that this is not a challenge. The monolith is estimated to weigh a few hundred pounds. Yeah. And it could severely injure someone if it were to fall. As such, it's probably wisest to give it a wide berth.
Okay.
So, the local authorities are aware.
It's like on top of a mountain? Sorry.
Yeah, it's on top of Pine Mountain. So, like, people were on a hike. I'll pop up some pictures right here. I'll see if I can send you guys this little photo.
So by it weighing 200 pounds, like it'd probably be hard to haul it up a mountain, right? Unless you had a UFO.
Yeah.
And did it from above.
Unless you had a UFO, or that is true. You'd have to have like multiple people, some kind of big wagon system, or like, but it's in like on like a hiking trail. I don't know how accessible it is. But it appeared out of nowhere. The hiker that found it, I guess he hikes often because he was there the day before and said that it wasn't there. So it just appeared out of nowhere. And yeah, so it could be, it's unclear whether these structures bear any connection to each other. It's possible that they're just copycats who heard about the first monolith in Utah and had some scrap metal lying around. It's also possible that they're a part of a big marketing stunt. So, yeah, who knows what the fuck it is or who the fuck has been making them. But that's what's going on in the world right now. Monoliths appearing out of nowhere.
So weird.
2020 is going to go out with a bang. I'm really hoping that aliens fucking come to the planet. This would be the year. Like, come on, guys.
That would be the cherry on top for this year.
Yeah.
And aren't monoliths
Alien
like
contact.
some sort of sign of like something like an apocalypse, or they're this isn't there some sort of significance, like it's a sign for like a new coming or a new age or something, a new year. 2020's done.
So. 2020's done. That's true.
The aliens are like, you guys got this. You're almost done with the year.
Let's throw them a monolith. That'll motivate them, and everyone's like, what the fuck is this?
They're doing good. We're freaking out. They're like, why don't they like it?
So if it is a marketing stunt, what do you think they're trying to market? The giant rod in the random parts in the world.
Also, I forgot to read the very end of that article. Okay,
if you have any guesses of what they're trying to market, leave a comment below.
Yeah. The end of this article, the last month, says these past few weeks have been an unexpected renaissance for unexplained phallic sculptures. Aside from the trio of monoliths, a 6-foot wooden penis also appeared on Gruten Mountain in Germany this week. So
shut up.
So
that's
we got metal monoliths.
hilarious.
Germany has wood penises. But yeah, that's my current event.
Wonderful.
That is, I was hoping you were going to talk about that.
So I'm going to start going into part 2, The Monster of Florence. If this is your first episode, welcome. But I would highly suggest listening to the one before this so that you understand the first half of this story. And if you need a recap, here's a little recap. So the Monster of Florence had a total of 16 victims that we know of. They're all couples, all in the countryside of Florence, Italy. They were all lovers. And the killings happened between 1968 and 1985, so there was a large span. He would kill both people, then mutilate the women, which was usually vaginal removal or breast or both, as we So Callously said last episode, it's fine. All killed by the same gun, which is a very important factor. And they have arrested one guy, which was the husband of the first female in the first couple that was found killed. But he let him go because the monster kept killing while he was detained. And where I'm going to take this story next is, so I was talking a lot about Spezzi, which is an investigating journalist in Italy who was around during the killings, and he was actually on site of the scenes quite a lot, and he was following it and reporting it and giving his own opinions and his own speculations. So I'm going to go into more of his account after all the killings and where it wound up meeting Douglas Preston, who was an American crime writer that was living in Italy, and befriended Spezzi and started to get interested in the monster of Florence as well. And this is like in the early 2000s. So there's a little bit of a span that I'm going to go over. That's why I have a part 2 here. So, excuse me. So there's been all these killings, and they have 2 people that they have detained, and they think they might be part of the killings. And essentially there's this like long legal battle between chief prosecutor in the case, Pier Luigi Vigna, and the examining magistrate, Mario Rotella. Essentially, Vigna wanted to release the 2 suspects that were in jail because he's like, it's not them, they're not related to this. They're not related to the Sardinian connection. That was a group that first started, who was a part of killing the wife of the first couple, which I mentioned last episode, where the theory was that they were killing him and then one person took the gun and continued killing. And the other guy, the magistrate, was like, no, it's most definitely them. And the 2 main people dealing with the case were fighting back and forth whether it was them or not. They were released. Those 2 people were like just fucked off with because obviously they weren't doing a very good job. And here enters Chief Inspector Ruggiero Perugini. It's Italian. Taylor can't even speak English.
Italiano.
And fun fact, he was actually fictionalized as Chief Inspector Rinaldo Pazzi in Thomas Harris's novel Hannibal. So this was the inspiration of the person who followed Hannibal and all that good stuff. So he decided to take on the case and look at a new perspective. He started with the axiom that the gun and bullets had somehow passed out of the hands of Sardinians, and that the monster was unconnected to the 1968 clan killing of the first wife. That was cheating. The forensic examination of the crime scenes had been spectacular and incompetent. People came and went, picking up shells, taking pictures, throwing their cigarette butts on the ground. Typical stuff that happened back in like the 1960s and 70s, where forensics weren't quite a thing as it is today. So what forensic evidence was collected was a knee print, a bloody rag, a partial fingerprint. Was never properly analyzed, and some of it had spoiled over time. And Perugini viewed this evidence with skepticism. He was smitten by the idea of solving the crime with computers, which by now it's in the 1980s, 1990s, and so it's kind of more of a thing of opening cold cases and being like, we have forensic evidence, and cold case files and all that good stuff follows up. So he examined tens of thousands of men in Tuscany, punching in various criteria: convictions for sex crimes, anyone who had any violent past or past prison sentences, and he just went through all the results and tried to narrow it down as much as he can. And eventually, words are hard. Sorry, guys. Like I said, I took a shot of tequila before starting this. So eventually he fingered a 69-year-old Tuscan farmer named Pietro Passiani.
He fingered him.
Huh?
Wait, what did you say he did to her?
Him.
Is that what you said?
I am reading the article of a crime novelist. He has.
I was like, he fingered who? What?
I was like,
God,
what did you? What did he do?
Maybe one day someone might take us seriously.
Obviously, whoever wrote this article assumed that its readers would be way more mature than Lexi and I.
I know. We're like, what did you do? What did you say?
Okay, so they singled him out. He was short, blunt body who had been convicted of sexually assaulting his daughters. His prison sentence coincided with the gap in killings between 1974 and 1981, and he was very violent. In 1951, he had bashed in the head of a traveling salesman whom he had caught seducing his fiancée, then raped her next to the dead man's body. Inspector Perugini had his suspect. All that remained was to gather evidence. In reviewing Pacini's old crimes, Perugini was struck by something. Pacini had told the police he'd gone crazy when he had seen his fiancée uncover her left breast for her seducer. This statement, he felt, linked Pacini to the monster who had amputated the left breast of two of his victims. So that's kind of like the main connection. And essentially this investigator just zeroed in on him. It was like, I have my suspect, blinders are up, this is the guy. And so they conducted a 12-day search of this guy's property. And mind you, this is like 20 years after the killings had stopped, or excuse me, like 10 years after the killings had stopped, about 25 years since the first one. And they took apart the whole farmer's land and everything, and didn't really find anything until the last day, which Perugini announced with great fanfare that he had found an unfired .22 bullet in the garden. Later in court, experts said it might have been inserted into the infamous Beretta and ejected without being fired. The ballistics report was inconclusive. In Pacini's garage, the police found a scrap of torn rag, which was duly catalogued. Not long afterwards, the Carabinieri received a piece of a .22 Beretta wrapped in a torn rag, with an anonymous note saying it had been found under a tree where Pacini often went. When the two rags were compared, they matched up. So they're like, oh, there's this bullet that was found on your farm on the last day of a 12-day search that might have been fired out of the gun, but not actually fired. And then here's this oily rag that was found with this gun that was just magically turned into us. So he was arrested on January 16th, 1993, and charged with being the monster of Florence. The public, by and large, approved of his arrest. Spezzi, who was an investigative journalist, however, remained unconvinced. Pacini's trial was being broadcast almost every night on television, and the drama of the proceedings overwhelmed all logic. The prosecutors presented no murder weapon and no reliable witnesses. Even Pacini's wife and daughters, who hated him, because remember, he sexually assaulted his daughters, they don't want anything to do with him, said he couldn't have been the monster. He was home drunk most of the time, yelling, hitting them, and acting like a bully.
They're like, he's not smart enough to get away with this shit, guys.
Exactly. So they convicted and sentenced him to a life in prison. However, during the mandatory appeal, the new prosecutor assigned to handle the case did something unheard of. He refused to prosecute. He essentially unraveled the case that the other prosecutor had made of like, look at this bullet, look at this rag, and it's like, no, all of that's just bullshit. It doesn't add up. You don't have any witnesses. You don't have a murder weapon. You have nothing. And so he's acquitted. Nothing. Exactly. He's acquitted. And like personally, I really don't think this guy was the monster of Florence, and especially, yeah, he's just a really fucking bad asshole. Anyway, when they tried to do the case and everything, this one guy came up and was like, I'm an eyewitness, I know he did it. And when they like questioned him, the witness had actually confessed to being Pacini's accomplice. He said that he and Pacini had been hired by a wealthy Florence doctor to handle a few little jobs. These little jobs, investigators later said, were to collect female body parts for black masses to be used as offerings to the devil. So that's what he said. However, he continued to contradict himself, and he didn't have any information on who the doctor was, who the other guy was, and it just all seemed really, really weird. And so with this in mind, the next like stream of investigation started to look for this mysterious monster or the mastermind behind the killings. Inconveniently, the police self-inculpating witness said he didn't know the doctor's name, and he claimed that Pacini only did, but Pacini denied the whole story to his dying day. And let's see. Spezzi continued to look into it and throwing different theories, and he was very obsessed with this case. And he was working on a bunch of other things too, and along the lines, like his wife was concerned for his mental health, and his boss was too, like, hey, you need to like focus on other things because he's not killing anymore. We think we have him, but we didn't. And it's a whole mess. Like, it's not good for you. Walk away from it. But he didn't. He essentially, as time went on, he continued to grow more contacts, as like a lot of journalists do. And along the way, he came across this one person who remains unnamed, who's part of a group that was secretly investigating the killings, and they were part of like officers or Secret Service or something. I'm not entirely sure, but they received a big scoop, and one of Spetsy's big scoops had been the discovery of a report prepared for Inspector Perguni by the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit in Quantico, Virginia. It had been commissioned in secret and then suppressed because it didn't describe Pacini as Perguni had wanted it to be. And Pacini was the one who beat his daughters and everything like that. So the report cataloged the killer's likely characteristics, explained his probable motive, and speculated as to how and why he killed, how he chose his targets, and what he did with the body parts he collected, and much more. His conclusion was that the monster was of a type well known to the FBI: a lone, sexually impotent male with a pathological hatred of women who satisfied his libidinous cravings through killing. The FBI reported that the monster chose the place for... Huh?
I said the worst kind of people. People like him.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's why he carved body parts out of his female victims. So the FBI report said that the monster chose the places for his crimes, not the victims, and that he would kill only in familiar locations. The murders had been committed in some of the most beautiful landscapes in the world, over a large area encompassing the hills southeast and north of Florence. Police had started to pin places in the map over the years, but never finding a pattern. But when Spetsy mapped the life and movements of the Carabini's suspect to locations of the killings, he found surprising overlaps. So that special, like, secret task force had the big scoop of the FBI profiling case, but also had a suspect that kind of aligned with it as well. Ooh. So by the spring of 2001, Spetsy and Douglas, who was writing this article and wrote the book with Spetsy, had to agree to write something together, a collaboration that would eventually take the form of a book. When we had chased down every other person we could find with some connection to the crimes, I pressed Spetsy on the subject of the Carabini's suspect, who he told me was the son of the original Sardinians. He was still alive and living in Florence. The stumbling block was Miriam, who had begged her husband not to approach him. Without telling Miriam, Spetsy and I began to plan our visit. We developed a cover story that I was an American journalist and Spetsy my translator, and we were conducting a series of interviews about the Monster of Florence case. Out of deference to Miriam's fears, we decided to use false names. So they decided to go looking for the suspect that the secret force had. So they decided to go looking for this individual that the secret group thought was the perpetrator, the Monster of Florence. So this person doesn't have a name, so we're just going to go by this person because they didn't want to disclose it because technically he's not implicated or anything of that nature, and they don't want to cause a lot of speculation and whatnot. So for years, the Sardinian had been living a quiet life in a working class area west of Florence. Remember, he's the son of the person that they think was the Monster of Florence. Let me clarify that real quick. Sorry. So we arrived at his apartment building at 9:40 p.m. when we would be most likely to find him home. Well, he knew Spetsy as soon as he saw him. He did answer his questions, and here are some excerpts from that interaction. Your father had strange sexual habits, Spetsy said. Perhaps that was a reason you hated him? Back then, I knew nothing about it. Only later did I hear about his tics. But you and he had some really big fights, even when you were young. In the spring of 1974, for example, you were charged with breaking and entering and theft. The man responded, that's not correct. Since he didn't know if I had taken anything, I was charged only with violation of demisal. I was only charged with the violation of breaking in. Another time we had a big fight and I pinned him, putting my scuba knife to his throat, but he broke free and I locked myself in the bathroom. When did you leave Florence? In the beginning of 1975. First I went to Sardinia and then to Lake Como. Then you returned and got married? Right. I married a childhood sweetheart, but it didn't work out. We married in 1982 and separated in 1985. What didn't work? She couldn't have children. If your father owned the 22 Beretta, you were the person in the best position to take it, perhaps during the breaking and entering in the spring of 1974. He didn't answer immediately. I have proof I didn't take it, he said at last. Which is, if I had taken it, I would have fired it into my father's forehead. Spetsy pressed on. He pointed out that our host had been away from Florence from 1975 to 1980, when there was no monster killings. When he returned, they began again. The Sardinian leaned back in his seat and his smile broadened. Those years were the best of my life, he said, up there at Lake Como. I had a house, I ate well, and all those girls. He whistled and made a vulgar Italian gesture. And so, Spetsy said, you're not the monster of Florence? There was only a brief hesitation. Sardinian never ceased smiling, not even for an instant. No, he said, I like my pussy whole, which is just really horrible, especially knowing what happened to the woman.
Yeah. Sounds
we rose to go.
Insensitive dick.
At the very least. Our host followed us to the door. Just before opening it, he leaned towards Spetsy and spoke in a low and casual voice. Ah, Spetsy, I was forgetting something. He leaned even closer and smiled. His voice took on a hoarse, gravelly tone. Listen carefully. I never joke around. And that was the end of that interaction, which, like, leaves you going, like, what the fuck, man? Right? Like, what are you hinting at, not hinting at? Did you do it? Was it your dad? Was it you? Was your dad part of the clan and you stole the gun and continued killing people? Who fucking knows, right? But he is, like, my number one suspect. To this day, we still don't know who the monster of Florence is. We may not ever have an answer, especially since what forensic evidence that was collected is very small and minimal. And where this story takes a turn now is very odd and, like, kind of interesting spin. So, you know, Spetsy and Douglas are working together and they sought out every single clue, whatever that they could do, trying to look into the monster of Florence. And to the extent that they interviewed this one guy at his house, right? Well, fast forward into time and they, like, move, Douglas goes back to the States to start working on the book, and they're talking via cell phones and emails and stuff of that nature. They separate. It's 2003, and then Douglas comes back to Italy because they want to do a PR run with the book since it was about to be lifted out. And then Spetsy's like, yo, we got another motherfucking lead. There's this villa that has something to do with things that I just skipped from all my notes because it's boring and not necessary, but, like, we gotta go check out this villa and stuff. And they go check it out. It's closed, so they can't do any work at all, and it's raining. And Douglas, like, wrote about how, like, disappointed he was about not being able to check it out, and he felt like he was so close to having an answer. And then they had a discussion of, like, okay, do we need to go to the police with this information? Are they going to take us seriously about it? And Spetsy's like, well, they'll take me seriously because they know how closely I've been following the case and stuff. Like, obviously, they wouldn't just take some random American's advice and whatnot. And then fast forward a couple of days later, Spetsy calls Douglas and says, we did it. We did it all. He didn't go into details, but I knew what he meant. He had given the information to the police. He also said, before I could ask too many questions, the telephone is bad. For 2 years, he had been complaining that the police were tapping his phones. And so with that, the police were tapping his phones because they believed Spetsy was the monster of Florence.
The detective?
What the fuck?
Yeah, the journalist. They thought
the journalist?
The journalist was the monster of Florence. And this isn't any of the investigators that I mentioned prior. This is, like, round 4 of someone looking at it with a fresh perspective and trying to think of every lead and stuff. So they were taping his phones. They were following him. They broke into his car and took his radio and, like, implemented devices in his car as well. And, like, this all came to light. And it was really like, what the fuck are you talking about? They, like, knocked on his door at 3 o'clock in the morning, demanded that he evacuate and had a search order, and, like, took everything that he had on the monster of Florence, book stuff, pictures that he took back in the day, everything that they had on him. And then they also called in our dear friend Douglas, the writer, to be like, okay, like, we just want to talk to you about this one thing. And it started off as, like, normal, like, conversation, like, back and forth, and then it started to get really heated. And in this moment, you can read the article, he he's a really good writer, and that's why I copied and pasted everything, because it was so beautifully written. But I was like, I don't want to talk for 3 hours. But he was explaining how at first it just started off as a normal like kind of talk, and then it started to get a little bit heated, and they played back the audio from the phone call of Spetsy said, we did it all, in reference to like telling the police. But the police are saying, what did you do, did he admit it to you, like and like using that against him, and like making Douglas trip on his words, to the fact that Douglas is like, I sound like I'm lying because I'm not confident anymore, but that's because they're tripping me up so much and I'm speaking Italian instead of English right now, so like that's a little bit broken, I don't have a lawyer. And finally they released him, but they essentially said, you need to go the fuck home right now, and we'll call you back when we have like an order, because we think you have some shit to do with it. To this day, he's kind of banned from Florence, and Spetsy is still being looked into and like being berated by the police right now on various different cases. And it's like, could it be Spetsy? I don't
Fuck, what if it is? You don't think so?
Like, who fucking knows who the monster of Florence
is? Plot twist.
It was a crazy fucking story, and it had a lot of moving parts, but I really wanted to share it because it was just fucking crazy. Was it the Sardinian connection of the passing of the gun and then one person like continuously killing? Was it the journalist? Was it the other guy that they went and interviewed? Who fucking knows?
What if it was like the police or someone in there trying to like push the eyes towards Betsy?
Yeah, trying to get him off their scent. Ooh, that's a good theory too.
Who fucking knows?
Crazy.
But Angela, what do you have for us this week?
Well, as someone who covers aliens, I have not done this story, but it's a classic, so I thought I would finally cover it.
Heck to the yeah.
So, the night sky was roaring with thunder on the evening of July 2nd, 1947. As a storm grew, something occurred that night that made history and put a small town on the map as home to one of the United States' most mysterious and conspiracy-filled events. The next morning, a rancher named Mark Brazel found something unusual in his sheep pasture, a mess of metallic sticks held together with what seemed like tape and chunks of plastic and a foil reflector, scraps of heavy, glossy, paper-like material. So, unable to identify the strange objects, Brazel called the sheriff. The sheriff, in turn, called officials at the nearby Army Air Force Base. Soldiers fanned out across Brazil's field, gathering the mysterious debris and whisking it away in armored trucks. So on July 8th, in a town southeast of the mysterious debris, the headline, RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region, was the top story in the Roswell Daily Record. So, was it true? No one really knows. But on July 9th, So on July 9th, an Air Force official clarified the paper's report. The alleged flying saucer, he said, was only a crashed weather balloon. However, to anyone who had seen the debris or the newspaper photographs of it, it was clear that whatever this thing was, it was no weather balloon. Some people
Are those newspaper photos still around?
Honestly, I should have gone around and looked, but if they are still around, I'm gonna pop that up right here. But I feel like they like kind of did a clean sweep of everything.
No, they never existed.
Yeah,
those in your mind. It's
like
fine.
literally retracted everything the next day. So some people believed and still believe that the crashed vehicle had not come from Earth at all. They argued that the debris in Brazel's field must have come from an alien spaceship. So These skeptics grew more numerous during the 1950s when the Air Force conducted a series of secret dummy drops over air bases, test ranges, and unoccupied fields across New Mexico. These experiments, meant to test ways for pilots to survive falls from high altitudes, sent featureless dummies with latex skin and aluminum bones that looked an awful lot like a space aliens were supposed to be looking like.
So they made the dummies out of like what they thought aliens might look like?
Yeah, so people were like, they're disposing of the aliens' bodies. And they're like, no, we're testing dummies, And they're like, nope, they're throwing aliens from the sky. It's raining aliens. Yeah.
Oh, there's always a body.
So, to people who believed the government was covering up the truth about the Roswell landing, these dummy drops seemed just as suspicious. They were convinced that the dummies were actually extraterrestrial creatures who were being kidnapped and experimented on by scientists. So, yeah, it's like, ooh. It turned out that the Army knew more about Brazel's flying saucer than it let on. Since World War II, a group of geophysicists and oceanographers from Columbia University, New York University, and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution on Cape Cod had been working on a top-secret atomic espionage project at New Mexico's Alamogordo airfield that they called Project Mogul. So Project Mogul used sturdy, high-altitude balloons to carry low-frequency sound sensors into the tropopause, which is a fairway part of the Earth's atmosphere that acts as a sound channel. And in this part of the atmosphere, sound waves can travel for thousands of miles without interference, much like under the ocean. The scientists believed that if they sent microphones into the sound channel, they would be able to eavesdrop on nuclear tests as far away as the Soviet Union. So according to the U.S. military, the debris on Brazel's field outside of Roswell actually belonged to Project Mogul. It was the remains of a 700-foot-long string of neoprene balloons, radar reflectors for tracking, and sonic equipment that the scientists had launched from the Alamogordo base in June, and that had evidently crashed in early July.
So it wasn't an alien spaceship, it was a science experiment.
To spy on the Russians. That's what, the new thing is. Okay, it's that. Because the project was highly classified, no one at the Roswell Army Airfield even knew that it existed, and they had no idea what to make of the objects Brazel had found. In fact, some officials on the base were worried that the wreckage had come from a Russian spy plane or satellite information that they were understandably reluctant to share with the public. The weather balloon story, flimsy though it was the simplest and most plausible explanation they could come up with on a short notice. Meanwhile, to protect the scientists' secret project, no one at the Alamogordo could step in and clear up the confusion. So, Roswell, you guys have heard of it, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. It had a huge impact on today's UFO and flying saucerism and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And many people still believe that the government and military are covering up the truth about alien landings around Roswell. So what's interesting is that although the Pentagon declassified most of its projects or most of its files on Project Mogul and the dummy drops, there's a lot of he said and she said of people who are witnesses that claim to have seen actual aliens and creatures being pulled from the craft that kind of contradicts these declassified documents. So it's still kind of up in the air. And one of the things that I recently came across, there's a woman that she was a host, or she was a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast, right? Her name is Annie Jacobson, and she's a journalist, right? And she wrote a book called Area 51, where she actually gathered a bunch of different sources. And one source, I think it was the most important one that she talked about on Joe Rogan, he claimed that what really happened from his perspective, from what he knew, I think he was actually part of the Air Force that had to do with like cleaning up the whole thing. And he saw these like figures that they were taking out. But what he was told as like someone that was in the Army or like on the Air Force was that what they found was actually experimented humans that the Russians sent. That like what it was like whatever happened in Roswell was like a fake UFO crash that like the Russians tried to, because it happened like so close to the air base, right? So apparently what happened is like they sent this craft with these experimented humans in there, and when they received the humans or like the weird creatures or whatever it was, everyone was so like, I guess, in awe of how morphed they were and like how I can't think of the word, but
like tortured they were, and
how tortured, like they were wondering like how did the Soviets know how to do this, but they didn't want to release to the public that the Soviets were able to get so close to an Army Air Force base, because it was during a time that, dude, like the USSR, like who fucking knows what's gonna happen next, you know? So they didn't want the public to know that they could penetrate our like base, so they kept it on the down low. But this guy who was her source was like kind of crying when he was telling her the story, because he was part of the project that tried to recreate what the Russians had done to the humans. And they were apparently, as like a way to experiment and figure out how they did it, they were experimenting on like handicapped children. And so he has this like, he was like 90 years old, like her source, who she didn't reveal the name of, so it's like who freaking knows if this is even a dependable source. But apparently she's like, from what I can see, he believed what he was telling me. I don't know if it was the absolute truth, like if they told him the truth, but like the way he was crying, the guilt he seemed to have felt for participating in it. But that's like another thing that may possibly have been what happened for Roswell. Like it could be aliens, it could be this Project Mongol with the like sound waves and trying to listen to the Soviet Union, or it could be the Soviet Union themselves trying to like send a message or kind of create disturbia in the US.
Whoa.
Fuck. All of the above suck balls.
And this is in the 1940s?
Yeah, 1947.
That's so long ago.
Crazy.
Yeah, and I'm
Roswell.
Just like,
I've always heard the name Roswell, and I knew it had something to do with aliens, but I hadn't heard the full story, so that's really interesting.
Yeah, so that's Roswell. Who knows what it was? I'm pretty sure it wasn't a weather balloon, though. So that's like, that's the last thing I think it was. But if it's, but if it's like experimented humans sent by, that's like crazy. I don't know, but it's like, it could possibly be true, because Soviet Union, man, they didn't mess around, you know?
Well, like the worst part is neither do we. Like he even admitted that they were doing these tests on people to try and replicate what they think Russia may or may not have done. So like no one has clean hands here. Yeah,
what I wonder too is what if from his perspective, it was Russia that sent over these things and it was just experimented on humans, but what if it really was aliens and that was the army trying to make sense of it, being like, nope, it's the freaking Russians, these are experimented humans, let's replicate it.
Okay.
You know? And like from his perspective, he was like, we were just trying to replicate it, but it's like, well, the Russians are like, we didn't do anything.
What?
Who the fuck are you talking about?
Yes, we penetrated your base. Yeah. It's like, who did that? Did you send that? No, I didn't send that. Did you
Me?
send that? Did you
No, absolutely not. Oh my god.
But yeah, so that's my story for this week.
That's good.
That gave me goosebumps.
I know.
Lex, what do you have for us this week?
Well, as you know, I am back home on Kauai with the fam bam. And the other night was my mom's birthday. Didn't forget it this year.
Good. I remembered to text her too.
Fuck, I didn't text your mom. Oh God. Happy birthday, Auntie April.
Show up at their house.
I know. I have to see your dad this time too, especially. But
oh yeah, you're already grounded. Bring vanilla ice cream.
Okay. Yes. But anyways, so for my mom's birthday, my aunt, uncle, and cousins, one cousin, Braden's like super afraid of COVID, and he thinks that me and Brendan and Brittany have it because we traveled recently, but so he's staying away from us. Anyways, so we were all over and just chatting about this one thing that happened, which is the story I'm going to be telling today. So it's a personal story, and we were all like laughing about it. We were like, that was like a hectic day, and my Uncle Brent, who's an avid listener of the podcast, so hi, Uncle B, he was like, you should cover this on your podcast. I'm like, yeah, I should, because it was fucking crazy. Okay, so on the morning of Saturday, January 13th, 2018, residents in the state of Hawaii received an emergency alert on their phone that read as follows, in all caps. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. And here's a photo of the emergency alert that people received. So as you can imagine, you're just sitting at home, chilling, 8 in the morning, and you get this emergency alert on your phone. That's going to freak you out. So the alert was also broadcasted all over radios, TV stations, and cell phones in Hawaii. And the civil defense outdoor warning sirens were authorized and sounded by the state. So again, as one can imagine, panic ensued. So that day, I was visiting my boyfriend at the time, ex-boyfriend, single now. And I got a call from my mom, and I'm like, hey, Mama, what's up? And on the other end, she's like, Lexi, there's a missile coming. I love you. You were the best daughter ever. And I'm like, what the fuck are you saying? And she was like hysterical and freaking out, which naturally made me hysterical and freaking out. So I remember we were driving at the time. We had like pulled over somewhere for some reason. And I just remember like punching my car. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I was like running through the streets like, does anyone know what's happening? I'm like, there's a missile going to Hawaii. And everyone was like looking at me like I was a crazy person. And so that was what was happening with me. Meanwhile, my parents are freaking out. So my Aunt Annette, who lives around the corner, she has like a basement kind of bunker thing. So my parents grabbed the dogs. They left my grandpa at home asleep. They left Papa. Yes.
They grabbed the dogs,
though. They grabbed the dogs, and they're driving like 60 miles an hour through Princeville. My dad's like, I considered cutting through the golf course to like get through to my Aunt Annette's house. And while they're driving 60 miles an hour through Princeville, my dad and mom are like yelling out the window at people walking their dogs like, get inside, take cover. There's a missile coming. And they like get to my aunt's house, and they're all freaking out. And another thing that was happening, so my Uncle Brent and Cody were driving on their way to a swim meet when they heard the alert. And apparently, like, if you're in a car during a nuclear bomb, it'll cook you like a microwave. So I think the alert on the radio was like, if you're in your car, get out now and take cover. So they were like driving by the Safeway in Kapa'a, and they just like parked the car and everyone started running towards the Safeway. And my aunt was like calling Cody, and they were like basically like everyone was saying goodbye to each other, that they loved them. And Cody and my Uncle B were like in the liquor section at Safeway apparently, and Cody's like, Mom, will you be mad at me if I start drinking? And she's like, do whatever you want. So it was just like so crazy. And now we can like laugh about this. We were telling stories about it the other night, but that day it was like, it felt like the worst day of my life. And Taylor, I don't know what happened with you that day. I feel like we've talked about it, but did I call you?
You called me.
Oh,
I was at work. I was working at Bootables, living in Santa Barbara at the time, just like cooking some motherfucking mac and cheese, just doing the setup and cooking all the food and everything. And all of a sudden I get like 12 messages from you, and you start calling me, and you're like, you need to call your parents. The world is ending. There's a missile. And I was like, okay, for starters, none of my family members have texted me.
Nobody reached out.
Like, no one gave a fuck about the only living McGinnis on the mainland, because they were all home at that point. And like, so then I call my mom, and I'm just like, Lexi just called me, freaking the fuck out, saying that her mom just called her saying goodbye. This is the end. Like, there's a missile. And my mom's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a false alarm. I'm like,
God.
Why aren't you freaking out?
Why didn't she call me? I know. And then, but
like, Mom and Dad, come on, get your shit together.
Well, because I'll talk about this more too, but there were just different events that happened to where it felt like it was a real thing, at least to my mom. But then my dad called like before we knew exactly what was going on, and he's like, I don't know, we're looking at the news. He's like, next time I'll be the one to make the call. I'm like, please, this woman traumatized me.
Sorry, Auntie Tracy.
But anyway, so 38 minutes later, officials informed the public that it was just an oopsie daisies. I pressed the wrong button. A simple mistake, miscommunication during a drill at the Hawaii Emergency Management Center. Or Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. As you can imagine, all this is a little suspicious, and here's some more background information that, for me, adds to the suspicion. So, during this time, if you recall, in 2018, there were escalating tensions between North Korea and the United States. That was, like, at the height when Trump and Kim Jong-un were, like, fighting and threatening each other, and I remember I was screaming, like, fuck Trump! I'm like, my family's gonna die! And I was losing my shit, but... So, again... Because of the heightened tensions, Hawaii, so on Kauai we have the Pacific Missile Range or Ranch or something, and it's one of the first defenses towards any missile coming from Korea, which is Kauai, that would shoot another missile to shoot it down or something. I'm not quite sure how it works. But anyways, if we did get word of, if North Korea did launch a missile, Kauai would have 12 to 15 minutes of warning time to do something about it. For people to take cover or for them to shoot down the missile or do what they needed to do. And again, some weird things were happening. So this happened January 2018. In October of 2017, so a couple months before, all of the students at the University of Hawaii received an email, and the subject line was, in the event of a nuclear attack, and it contained instructions from the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency on how to react in case of a nuclear attack. And people were like, this is weird, like, why are you even sending this to us? And a few weeks prior to the oopsie daisies, the Garden Isle, the newspaper here on Kauai, published this really weird, kind of ominous article of, like, do's and don'ts if a nuclear bomb were to hit Kauai. And one of them was, like, don't use hair conditioner. My Aunt Annette was telling me this. So don't use hair conditioner because that'll, like, further vaporize you or something. She's like, what? This is so weird. Why are they even telling us this? Like, what are the odds? I know.
Like, it's like, oh, man, I have 12 minutes to wash my hair.
I know, exactly.
All the product that's in here.
Yeah. I know, it's super strange.
It makes me wonder if it's like, was a social experiment to see what their reactions would be if they did something of this nature.
There
like,
are
if there was
so
something
many
they
theories.
thought.
But like people on Oahu were like opening up manholes and putting kids into them. People were just like panicking and freaking out. I don't think anyone actually died from all of the panic, but it definitely, like, it was traumatizing.
Yeah. I think there's like some celebrity who was on
in Hawaii at the time?
Yeah, in Hawaii at the time, and he was talking about it. I think he was just like drinking. He's like, all right, I guess this is it.
This is it. I know. I remember too, I called Maria after I like called you or something because she was on Kauai at the time. I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I don't know, we're just kind of hanging out, like nothing's happened yet. I'm like, I should have called you first before my mother, like, goddamn. Because I was
like, my mom would be the same way. She'd be freaking the fuck out.
Hysterical. Yeah. But anyway, so again, prior to the day, January 13th, that it happened, 26 drills had been conducted by that agency. So they've done enough drills. They fucking know how it works. Like, just the fact that they're blaming it on a mistake is very suspicious. So culpability for the false alarm was attributed to an employee at the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, and I couldn't find his name anywhere, but he worked there for 10 years. And I guess, like, some of his coworkers mentioned he had some, you know, strange behaviors and maybe made some mistakes before, or maybe they were paid to say that. I don't know, just a thought. So what the story is, during a shift change, the supervisor of them ran an unscheduled drill But during the drill, at one point, the supervisor deviated from the script and started saying, "This is not a drill," according to officials and witnesses during the time. And the employee who sent out the alert, he's like, die hard. Like, I didn't think it was a drill. It felt real at the time. And he says, a quote from him is, 100% sure that it was the right decision and that it was real. And he goes on to mention that he's not to blame for the incident. So he got fired, I believe. But it's an overall system failure, which I kind of agree with him, like, especially if it's true about the supervisor running the drill that wasn't scheduled and saying this is not a drill. So I think something definitely happened. I don't know if like the system was hacked or if there was actually a missile that ended up getting shot down, but everyone involved believed that it was really happening. And my mom, and I won't give too much detail about this, but she has connections or a friend that she was texting at the time who works closely with PMRF, and they're like, this is real, this is happening, like take cover now, like something's going on. And before that too, I think the week before, they were running all sorts of weird like sonar drills. So just like all these crazy drills and all these weird articles being sent out.
And then all the tension that was
all the tension. So at the time, again, yeah, like when my mom called me, I'm like, holy shit, like this is actually something that could happen. So it felt very real. And then even stranger, on January 16th, 3 days later, Japan had a similar alarm sent out. So they had another error, oopsie daisies, about a North Korean missile being fired at Japan, which everyone was like, what the hell's going on? And the message said, it appears that North Korea has launched a missile. Just so calm. It's so much calmer than Hawaii's like, take cover now. This is not a drill. It's like, it appears North Korea has launched a missile. We're fucked. And then something else happened just this year, January 12th, again, nearly 2 years later from when the Hawaii missile false alarm happened. The Emergency Operations Center for the Canadian province of Ontario mistakenly issued an emergency alert on its Alert Ready system for all television stations and television providers, radio stations, and wireless networks in the province, containing an advisory related to an alleged incident being addressed at the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station, so maybe like some sort of nuclear emergency or a nuclear meltdown. The alert was confirmed to be a false alarm, but in the manner that they described it being a false alarm, it's nearly identical to how they banished off the Hawaii incident. So they said it was a result of operator error in the emergency operations during a routine internal test, also during a shift change, which is exactly what they said about Hawaii, which I'm like, so specific.
Bullshit.
I guess allegedly.
That's weird.
I know.
They
the
were
officer
missiles, but they were able to like misdirect them or
shoot them down, and they didn't want exactly. Honestly, that's kind of what I think. War. Yeah, they just don't. They're hiding shit from us. Come after me.
They're always hiding.
I'm exposing you.
That's scary because it's like
Alexa's listening.
Whatever when you think about it, we don't know anything that's really going on.
Stop listening.
Unless it's.
Sorry.
She's really listening.
Yeah, she was.
Creepy.
That is
Alexa,
scary.
She's gonna expose me.
Yeah, but I just think it's like strange because if something like that were to happen, that unless the media covered it, we wouldn't know whether it's true or not,
Yeah, so who fucking knows if it was really just a mistake or if maybe we got hacked. Or if there was an actual missile that we shot down and they're just not telling us about it. I don't know, but what I do know is it was a very scary day, and now it's funny to laugh and talk about the stories and be like, oh, we were so dramatic. But every time my mom calls me, I get a little triggered. I'm like, what's it gonna be?
Yeah, especially like I just know exactly how Tracy reacted.
You
reacted that way towards me to a degree. So
it was intense.
Gotta love that PTSD.
But again, kind of a little conspiracy theory story with a personal touch.
Very nice.
That's what I have for you. It's pretty weird. I
kind of like forgot that happened. Like I didn't, but as soon as you mentioned it, I was like, boom. Brought me back to the day.
And also the fact that it took them 38 minutes to be like, it was a mistake. Like, why did it take so fucking long? Like, if it was a mistake, you should have been like instantly like, oh shit, I didn't mean to do that. No, it wasn't a mistake.
And no big deal. My family didn't want to alert me of their almost certain.
They're like,
Taylor. They're like, yeah, if it happens, she'll figure it out.
I would rather be ignorant towards it. Like, I think my mom traumatized me more by calling me.
Probably.
My dad's like, I'll call next time. I'm like, please do. God.
Be calm and collected. Alrighty. Angela, do you have some cards to read for this episode?
Yes, I do.
Especially with that crazy energy that we just ended on.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Can you predict the next oopsie daisy?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So for those of you who do not listen to all of our episodes, at the end of shame on you. But at the end of every full episode, I pull an oracle card. So here it goes. This is going to be, it can be whatever resonates with you, or maybe this has to do with this episode in general. Let me shuffle my deck. All right, I'm going to pick this one. Emotions are running high.
Yes.
That has to do with Lexi's story.
Oh my god.
That's hella funny. So emotions are running high. Let me pull up the little explanation for this. Emotions are running high. This card suggests that the answer to whatever you're asking is right larger than the silvery full moon set against the velvety night sky. If you're wondering how successful something is going to be, such as a job or a relationship, the answer is very. To use common parlance, wait, what are these words? There's actually hard words in this one. Parlance. The answer to your question may well be that it's right under your nose. This card is about being larger than life, being special and bursting with energy that you can tune into and work with. You can expect plenty of good things and positive outcome when this card comes up, but you may find that there's also a lot of emotion to deal with too. There's also a sense that the opportunities around whatever you're asking about don't come along every day, so take action. Attuned to the moon says success is close. I just must trust. And additional meanings for this card is a resolution to your question is closer than you may think. Don't ignore the obvious. Something exciting lies ahead. Make sure you don't blow events out of proportion. Speak to the goddess. Ask her for assistance.
Goddess, help me through the next couple of weeks of school so I can have overwhelming joy.
Kill it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening, friends, and hopefully you tune into other episodes. I know we're a little sporadic and can't speak English, but hey, we have a good ass time.
But that's why you love us.
So on that note, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.